Joshua giving the people a final charge. You've now entered into the land. Yahweh has been faithful to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob to give you the land that he promised. But you have a responsibility. You must be courageous, and you must go and you must expel the Canaanites from the land. And that leads us to the book of Judges, where the people refuse to do what the Lord tells them to do. But before we dive into some content, I wanted to just pull up a map here for y'all. So you can see here, especially the picture on the left, this gives us a good picture idea of where the different judges are in kind of certain times. So you can see that some of them overlap, some are more significant than others, but really most of the judges are centered really south of Ephraim, and we'll kind of see maybe why here in a second. But I hope this helps just to kind of give a picture of where the judges are and why maybe they're placed in certain positions at certain times. But hopefully that's a helpful map for you. But all right, let's go ahead and start to overview here the book of Judges. So the Hebrew root Shephatim literally means those who judge, or the book of Judges, while the Greek title Kratai literally just means judges. So a judge is typically somebody, like if you read like Deuteronomy and as you kind of move forward, a judge is somebody who's going to make a decision about something, typically like a legal decision. And as we'll see here in the book of Judges, the judges sort of do that, but they're mostly raised up to judge other nations. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. But in general, the literary flow. So Judges continues the narrative of the Pentateuch and Joshua, recording Israel's failure to occupy all of Canaan and their, that is the Israelites, descent into complete chaos. We'll see that parsed out in just a second here. But chronologically, Judges covers more than a few centuries. It covers from the death of Joshua through the Israelite civil war. So we talked about this a little bit with biblical historiography. All right, Judges covers centuries, and yet it is slammed into, I believe, 21 chapters. So each of those chapters are going to be selective in the story. Maybe not in the story that's telling. That's not helpful. Each of the stories are selected for a certain reason to help fulfill the literary end of the book. And we'll see what that is here in just a moment. But that's the overview of Judges. So, all right, big picture here. So, the book of Judges records Israel's failure to conquer the land, highlights their depravity, and then stresses the need for a righteous king. So, again, remember how the book of Joshua goes. The people are charged to take the land with courage, complete reliance on the Lord. That's a huge theme. And the book concludes with Joshua telling them to be covenantly faithful. Don't be idolaters. And he reminds them, you still have a job. Go take the rest of the land. Well, Judges continues the storyline, and the beginning of it records their failure, the Israelites' failure to conquer the land. So you can see here I have this example from Judges 1:27 through 28. Manasseh, that is the tribe of Manasseh, not necessarily a specific person like King Manasseh later, but literally the tribe, did not drive out the inhabitants of Beth Shean and its villages, or Taanach and its villages. When Israel grew strong, they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but they did not drive them out completely. That's a big no-no. The people, and becomes a constant theme, the Canaanites are supposed to be driven away. We saw that in Deuteronomy, Numbers. But what do the Israelites do? They don't drive them out, and instead they, in a sense, accommodate them, and they become forced laborers for them. And we'll see as we've read through Leviticus and other books as well, the reason this is so significant is because the Israelites will adopt the Canaanite way of living if they do not drive them out. And I think as we get to the end of Judges, that's exactly what happens. These people are crazy. And so that then leads us to the second section of Judges, which is really the main section of the book, which is Yahweh raising up various judges to deliver Israel. And the reason he raises up these Shophatim, these Shophets, is to deliver the people from the bondage that they entered into. And again, the reason that they entered into like bondage to certain people is because they were covenantly unfaithful. Instead of being strong and courageous, trusting in the Lord, driving people away, they actually adopt the Israelites, that is. They adopt the Canaanites' way, and they continue in their idolatry. And because of that, things really spiral out of control and lead to the final conclusion of the book, which is absolutely wild, and that is the Israelite civil war and provision for the tribe of Benjamin. Because of this civil war, which was essentially the 11 tribes against the small tribe of Benjamin, because of the tribe of Benjamin's wickedness, the Israelites fight, and the book essentially concludes with, although the men of Benjamin or the wives of Benjamin have been killed, there is a provision for them so that their tribe will continue to have existence. But as we get to the conclusion of the book, there is this constant theme like ringing over and over again, and that is the Israelites were wicked, that is, they were doing covenantly unfaithful things because there was no king in Israel. So, for example, the book basically concludes with this verse, Judges 21:25. In those days, that is, I would assume the day of the judges, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. So the book of Judges concludes with this reminder, hey, there weren't kings in Israel in those days. There was no king to lead the people to faithfulness. And because of that, everyone did what was right, not in the Lord's eyes, but in his own eyes. And that leads us to these three major takeaways for the book of Judges. And the first one is this, is everyone did what was right in their own eyes. This is a big no-no, right? Because the people are supposed to do what is right in the eyes of Yahweh. And instead, people do what is right in their own eyes. So here's a good example of this, is the example of Samson. Most people are familiar with the judge Samson, who falls for Delilah. And why does he do that? Because he does what is right in his own eyes. And so this book is really meant to highlight the depravity in Israel. Everyone is doing what they themselves want to do. Whether it's Samson or whether it's the tribe of Benjamin, etc. People are doing what is right according to their own flesh. And it's almost like what you have with Adam and Eve in the beginning. What becomes right with the Israelites as they wander through the wilderness is this constant refrain, this constant cycle of the Israelites and the people who are supposed to be closest to the Lord doing what is right in their own eyes as opposed to what is right in the eyes of the Lord. And that leads us to number two. For these people to do what is right in their own eyes, that implies that they're doing evil in the eyes of the Lord. Samson, again, a good example. The one who is supposed to be modeling faithfulness as a judge is the one who's actually entering into sin and living like a fool. And there's other examples that could be given as well. But essentially, these people, they failed to take up the charge that Joshua gives them at the conclusion of his book. They don't put away their idols, and instead of putting away their idols, they continue to worship them, and they take on the lifestyle of the Canaanites who are in the land. The Canaanites chop people up into 12 pieces and send them around. That's not what an Israelite is supposed to do, but that's exactly what happens. And that leads us to number three, is the constant refrain in the book of Judges, especially at the end, is the reason for this chaos is there's no king in Israel. And we should be familiar with Deuteronomy 17, which outlines laws for Israelite kings. There's no king at this time, but let's think about this again. Biblical historiography is selective and it is theologically interpreted. Well, there is a reason that all of these chaotic stories have been selected and they lead to the conclusion that it does. This is preparing us for a king to come onto the scene. This is preparing us, telling us, hey, there is a king who needs to come in to make things right. And the book of Judges is ultimately preparing us for no king, or for one king in particular, and his name is King David. And we'll see that especially as we move forward here through the book of Samuel and the book of Kings. But here's a question for you to think about as we wind down the book of Judges. Why would a king be so important for the people's faithfulness? Why was a king necessary for the people to do right in the eyes of the Lord? That's an important question to grapple with as we move into Samuel and Kings, which record the rise of the Israelite monarchy. Why was a king necessary for the people to do right in the eyes of the Lord? And that's going to lead us to, again, Samuel and Kings